Welcome to another edition of the Bhandwagon Podcast. And today, one of the things around the whole kind of podcasting arena is trying to, one of the courtesies to invite other podcasters on. And today, I'm joined by the BritAsia Podcast team and especially the main geezer at the front, Ted Samra. How are you?
What's going on, Ricky? I'm good, man. How you, bro?
I'm not sure in terms of whether you are the main one. I just added that little bit in there. I hope you appreciate that.
No, I appreciate that, man. It's always a team effort, but it's nice to be there. Appreciate it.
The spearhead. So, obviously, like, I know you're into, like, there's a whole music scene and that. Is there, like, a music video that you're going in there with the coat? And...
You know what? It's actually really cold in the office. That's why I'm wearing it, man. Like, Birmingham's a lot colder than London, because obviously, it doesn't know me. Like, I'm based in London.
I just thought some of the superstars that you're hanging around with that, you know, I was just waiting for you to wear shades.
No, it's actually really cold in here, so I just want to leave my coat on, man, because it's going to be a while.
You should tell Tony to pay for some heating.
I know, here's this building. It's a nice building, but the heat just goes through the roof.
It's freezing, isn't it? It's freezing. So, like, is that what you like? You spend a little bit of time at Birmingham studios and just to go off to like London, or how do you balance that around?
So I'm basically predominantly London-based. So obviously there's two sides of me. So there's like, you know, the side you see in podcasting, and there's obviously the commercial side of myself. The commercial side of myself is I'm actually a social media manager. So I look after a lot of companies in developing and growing their social media footprint. And this is something that I've been doing since I was since the days of who remembers High Five, Bebo, MySpace, etc. You know, so I got onto the whole social media management at a very, very young age. I just didn't realize that there was a demand for it until, you know, later on. So in terms of like, you know, the music industry and stuff like that, I've been involved in the music industry since I was 14, 15.
And what did you do like 14, 15 wise? What were you doing? Let me get door player.
No.
Oh, what?
This was
a door player. What the fuck?
A door player. So at a young age, it was literally a case of like, I had an interest in music. Like I do have quite a lot of family members who are involved in the music industry. Like my mama in Canada, you know, he's been responsible for some of the biggest artists to date. You know, he helped like someone Mohan Morris, you know, launch their career, Feroz Khan, and so on and so forth. You know, he's also very, very good friends with KS Mukkan, and you know, they've done a lot of stuff together in the past. So, you know, on one side, on the other side, I've got, you know, family relations with the likes of AS Gang and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff, you know, it's always nice to kind of be involved in. But you know, I came in before I even started listening to Punjabi music. I was more a hip hop head. You know, I wasn't really that kind of in tune with Punjabi music, as in growing up, yeah, there's live bands, but when you kind of hit that kind of teenage years, it was more about, you know, your Dr. Dre's, your Eminems, Snoop, etc. And then obviously there's that transition in UK Bhangra when, you know, the hip hop sound came across and sampling was very, very heavy. You had like some DJ Sanj kind of like, you know, the next episode and that kind of stuff. You had RDB doing the whole garage vibe, etc. So that kind of got me kind of interested in music. So I wanted to learn how to make beats. I wanted to learn how to mix. I wanted to become a DJ, all that kind of stuff. Like, you know, now like everyone's doing it, but this is when like it was a very, very kind of niche kind of thing. So I got in touch with, you know, a record label, and I kind of said, look, man, I want to learn. And they were like, yeah, we'll teach you everything, you know, because back then, you know, the only way to communicate was MSN. So like now,
who was the label?
I don't really want to say, man.
Oh, okay.
And there's a reason for that. But yeah, there's, and I'll get into that a little bit later on why. I don't mention label, but got involved with them, and then kind of the people around in that label, they taught me everything, man. But the kind of one thing they kind of taught me was the back end of the industry. And when you're kind of young, you don't really care about the back end of the industry. But to be honest, looking back at it, had I not known that kind of stuff, it wouldn't have put me in the position I am now. You know what I mean? So to understand marketing, to understand PR, to understand, you know, how to do a lot of things. You need to understand the backside of the industry. You need to understand, you know, what works, what doesn't work, why it works. You need to understand how you make relations in the industry. You know, how you kind of build rapport with people, how you build rapport with radio stations, etc. Because realistically, if you ain't building rapport with anyone, your music or anything isn't getting played. As in, you could be a great artist, and if you're a great artist, by, you know, default, your music's going to get pushed out, etc. But if you're not building relationships in the industry, you're not going to get your music out. So from a very young age, I was taught this is how you build rapport, this is how you build relationships. You know, I was taught to kind of, these are your main radio stations, always look out for more radio stations, you know, set up meetings and that kind of stuff. So I got involved with that side, and then obviously from there, off the back of it, social media kind of came in. And then, you know, you create these profiles for these guys, you're creating kind of different techniques. Then obviously as social media evolves, you evolve the strategy and so on and so forth. So I got involved in that kind of side. Then while I was doing that, I was also kind of, you know, learning how to DJ. I was learning how to kind of make beats, etc. But there was this kind of transition point where I kind of saw things happening where artists just weren't being taken care of by labels. Artists were unhappy. People weren't making money. And then it's a case of, you've gone from the generation of where CD sales are generating a lot of funds to now they're not generating anything for a record label. So record labels are like, why should we invest in people who ain't kind of generating revenue for us? So then seeing that, I was like, well, if there's no money in the industry, who's going to invest in a young kid? Like, I'm done, man. Like, what's the point? Wasting my time in this? So the social media stuff, I kind of kept it as a kind of a hobby, just helping out other people here and there. But the music side, I just kind of just thought, fuck this, man. Like, if it's not financially viable, like, what's the point getting involved in this kind of stuff? But as a DJ, I knew, like, if I be a DJ, I can basically make money from, like, weddings, pre-weddings, etc. So I kept that kind of thing going as well. But then what happened was, man, like, as great as it was, I just hated rigging up, man, and unloading and stuff like that. Like, it's glamour, like, you know what I mean? Like, when you're up there doing it, but because when you're starting off, man, you got to get your own rig, you have to set up, you have to unload, you finish at unsociable hours. And when you're young, you don't really understand that, this is, you need to do this to kind of get to where you are. But at that kind of point, two things kind of clashed. It was, DJing and being a Bhangra dancer. I was like, you know what, Bhangra sounds more fun. And, coming from, a family, especially from Punjab side, like Nanke, Bhangra's massive out there. So my cousins, they've danced with likes of DAV College, Khalsa College, etc. Yeah. So I started getting influenced with those guys. And I was like, I want to dance, man. So, like, I spent time in India and learned to dance with those guys, came to the UK. I joined VP Bhangra, BritAsia Punjab. I started dancing with them. But what happened was I kind of just allowed music. I was like, if I'm enjoying kind of Bhangra dancing more than music. And I was like, I kind of just turned my back on music. I was like, DJing the whole side, just left it. But this is the thing, man. Like, you think being a Bhangra dancer is a lucrative industry? It's not. It ends up costing you more to be a Bhangra dancer.
So, like, what I'm getting from this, you're consistently bad luck with money, especially with in this industry.
Yeah, so then I became a Bhangra dancer. But you know what? It was fun, man. Like, I'm not gonna lie. With VP Bhangra, like, we went to the Olympics, went to Buckingham Palace. We went to like tour with the Sanj, like Jazzy, the Apollo. The team done great things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even seeing it now, it's like how this team kind of grew. Even now, you've got that next generation of kids who are now coming through, and it's kind of amazing, like, to see, like, what, Bhangra isn't about money. You're not going to become rich being a Bhangra dancer, but it's kind of keeping in touch with your culture. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who join the team who knew nothing about Punjabi culture, but by dancing, they started getting more in touch with, like, the language, the music, everything. And that's the kind of thing you want to see. You want your culture to remain alive, you know what I mean? So from then, basically, yes, then dancing. But then from that, I wanted to kind of get back into the whole music side thing as well. But I kind of just realized, you start hearing a lot more things. You know what I mean? Like, even from a young age, like, you start looking back in hindsight and, people that should be looking out for you, they're not looking at you. You're seeing things happening to people. When you're young, you don't understand. When you get older, you start realizing there's things going on in this industry which aren't right. There's things of how artists are being treated which isn't right. There's things.
What do you mean? So, like, obviously, like, for some people, in terms of they'll be, they could get that from kind of face value. But if you're looking through your experience, that you're seeing it from in different stages that you've talked about, from DJ to all this, what were some of the big things that you saw that you thought, hang on, that ain't right?
At hindsight, right? Like, at the time, like, when you're involved in any team or group or whatever, if you're loyal to your kind of leader, I call him a leader, right? You're going to believe everything that gets said. You're going to believe everything that they do is always right. And you're going to think that, it's always about, the team. It's always about a team. It's all about the great good. But sometimes when you're kind of so young, you're being manipulated and brainwashed into thinking that this is the right thing to do. So there was occasions where, some people were kind of burning bridges with people across the other side of the industry. And if you're kind of the face of, a company or a label, whatever, and you're burning bridges with everyone else, you automatically get kind of, given that same rep, like, oh, just because he's like that, his whole team are like that, or that individual's like that, etc., etc.
Yeah. Is that guilty by association? Because, like, I've only seen you. I didn't know you in the other kind of other areas, or I haven't. I've only seen you in the podcast area. So all this is new to me in terms of from what you're saying. But it's quite fairly common from what you were saying in terms of some of your stories that you can see a lot of people fall in love and fall out in love with their passion.
Yeah, and like there's instances, and one thing that someone said to me a while back was, and he mentioned it goes certain people that were supposed to take care of us. They were supposed to give us the right advice. They've been through those experiences, so they should lead you on the right path. They know right through wrong, but what they're doing is they're telling you wrong. And when they're telling you wrong, it makes you look bad. It makes you behave a certain way, etc. So then you start questioning, hold on. At the time, your loyalty is with whoever you're with. But when you step away from it and you start looking inwards, you're like, hold on, man. That guy did me wrong. That guy did me wrong. That guy, I've seen it happen, not just to DJs. I've seen it happen to producers. I've seen producers' careers ruined because, the people they were around didn't want them to work with somebody else, didn't want them to expand. There's a phrase where in the film B.I.G. where one of Biggie's boys says to him, look, I'll take the fall and I'll go to prison for you. And if I go to prison, you have to make it, because when you make it, we all make it. That attitude of we all making it isn't amongst other in this industry. It doesn't matter what side of the industry you look at, whether it's from Bhangra dancing, whether it's from music, whether it's from certain DJs, roadshows, etc. It's a lot of the time it's me, I. It's I have to eat first, then I'll feed everybody else, which I think is totally wrong. And that's sorry, just going on to the podcast. I'll come to the podcast a bit later on.
Yeah.
One of the topics we kind of discussed in the podcast was about that kind of stuff. It's about just imagine how much further we could all go if we work together. If we start creating our barriers and excluding each other, you're running your own little race in your own little lane. But imagine, like, for example, if, I don't know, another guy jumps on this podcast tomorrow, your podcast will blow up, the BritAsia podcast will blow up, another podcast will blow up, you know what I mean? And everyone does well because people kind of like those conversations, etc. But that attitude just isn't there.
I think it's maybe because the podcasting so far isn't as lucrative isn't lucrative at all, really. Unless you're on stupid numbers. But I think there's a difference between the end objective of, is it the passion that you're after?
Yeah.
Or is it the money?
100%.
Because if you think like the younger generation that I've kind of spoken to, especially in the music scene or in the DJ kind of thing, it's about peas, money, all of this bullshit. Yeah. And I said, you'll get, if that's what you want, that's what you will get it. You will get it. But it's at what cost?
Exactly.
What are you prepared to offset your passion for what you like? Are you prepared to offset it for the sacrifice that you won't see your family for that long? When are you going to get time to spend it? Knowing the risks of addiction with alcohol, cocaine, all of these kind of things, especially involved in that scene.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to kind of offset it for that? Because you will get the money. It's there. It is there. And I think what that does, it doesn't create unity.
Yeah.
It gives the fake impression like, I'm safe with you. I'm safe with you. Have your picture for the Instagram or whatever you're going to do. And then 10 minutes down the line, like, it's completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
But I think people just take it for credit that people don't know that shit's happening. I think that the industry is so small in the UK, especially. I'm very keen in the UK that everyone knows everyone anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just like,
because of how small this industry is. Like, I remember, and I'll be straight up, man. Like, I don't have to filter. I've seen artists manipulate models and all this kind of stuff when I was younger. And when you're younger, you kind of question, like, is this right? Because when you live such a kind of innocent life, when you're quite young, you're thinking, hold on, this is not right. But who are you as a young kid to kind of say, that's wrong for someone who's a lot older than you, who should know right from wrong? But then when you kind of get older and you're now in that position, like, there's been times where I've seen it happen in, when we go for a Bhangra team or like an after party and we see wrong things happening, you speak up. I've seen it happen amongst, certain artists who kind of slid into, influencers, DMs that, we work with, etc. And they've kind of been inappropriate. They think that because you're in this position, you can kind of do these things, say these things and get away with it. But remember, the industry is so small. Like, there's going to be, eventually that stories are going to come round and round and round and round. Yes, some stories might get fabricated and whatever. But in instances where you're kind of abusing your position to kind of, just for the wrong reasons, it's not right, because we are not a big industry. This is not a huge industry.
But how do you utilize then your platform, and BritAsia especially has been one of the dominant forces, or re-emerging in itself, really, in terms of working its way back up to where it was? Because I still feel that as the seeds changed, the channels had to change in the way that how it's put in and rebranding and re-exercising its way back to where it could and should be.
Yeah.
Like, how do you as a platform, as a channel, then try and regulate that, or try and clean that stuff up? Because surely at some stage you might have to say morally, I'm not going to play that person's song, or I'm not going to do this. Or you see people that cancel culture. Yeah. Are you almost kind of victim of? Are you at a risk of doing it yourselves?
As in, look, I can't speak for the rest of the channel.
I'm not just saying. I'm just saying from
just the podcast, but
from the podcast point of view.
From the podcast point of view, like when I was kind of called into the podcast, I was told, look, the podcast has started, it's doing okay, but make it more relevant and make it better. And the only way I could think of that was, you know what, tell real stories from real people impacting the scene, impacting the industry. Do you know what I mean? So the conversations that I was bringing to the platform were the real stories. So if we kind of go in chronological order, one of the first ones was about farmers protest, And I've always said, look, if you are Punjabi and you're about the Bhangra culture, you're a dancer, you're etc., and you're not supporting the farmers protest, you should not be kind of associated with this culture, because don't use this platform to rip it off for all its glory and reap the rewards. But when the struggle comes, you're nowhere to be seen. So the farmers protest podcast was there. And to be honest, we got love from that. We did get kind of hate from, those that are against the farmers protest, that you call them more these jumps, whatever. But, that's going to happen regardless, right? And then the next podcast we done, was likes with Chet Sandhu. And with Chet Sandhu, it wasn't a kind of life of crime podcast where we're kind of glorifying what he's done. We're not talking about, him being a smuggler, etc. It was about understanding what was the scenarios that caused you to become into that life. And it was a big issue of racism. What our parents and what our grandparents went through, it's not nice. And those stories are quickly getting brushed under the carpet. But we're in 2021, going 2022, and we've seen racism it hasn't disappeared. And it was important to have those conversations with the likes of Chet and Apache to kind of say, look, racism is still there. Just because, it's kind of been brushed under the carpet doesn't mean that it stopped. And, if we can kind of nip it in the bud now, we can prevent more kids going to that kind of life of crime. We can prevent more kids. And that's what that podcast was doing. And then at this point is when, we started getting a lot of kind of complaints from people saying you're glorifying the wrong things and this, that, and the other. The actual Chet Sandhu podcast was actually 2.5 hours. And because of complaints and whatnot, we had to cut it down to 45 minutes.
Is that because of, in terms of like, you're putting it onto TV? Whereas if you had it on a different platform, let's say YouTube or anything else, you wouldn't have those problems.
I think with YouTube, it's so much easier because you're in control of that. You know what I mean? But if you want to reach a bigger platform with messages, use your TV platform. And that was one of the things that BritAsia's podcast was doing.
But couldn't you just do it in terms of saying, here's a condensed version, the full version's available on these platforms?
Yes and no, because one of the biggest problems is, and I'll get to in a second, is when people start reporting your podcast. And when you start getting strikes, you're at risk of losing your channel. Do you know what I mean? And for like, if I was putting on my own personal channel, get strikes and pull down, fine. But for a company the size of BritAsia and their YouTube channel, if that gets striked and shut down, the channel's lost a massive kind of, tool that they're using. And it kind of, and from there, things just kind of went on. And like the next conversation we had was, there was, Jasveer Kaur from Core Movement, who spoke about being abused in a place of worship. Again, this is something that firsthand experienced it. She's very kind of, and the experiences and the trauma she went through. Again, those conversations need to be had. Apache kind of came in from his angle of, yes, we are looking at the victims, etc. But at the same time, we're letting perpetrators get away from it. And they're talking about the whole cultural attitude of, social conditioning and stuff like that. These conversations, again, need to happen because this abuse in our community is happening. But again, you shouldn't be talking about that. Why?
But do you feel, in terms of like, obviously they're very controversial kind of subjects, and I think depending on the angles that you're coming from, obviously with TV, it's got to have a different captive audience very quickly, short, sharp. Yeah. The podcasts are not necessarily designed from that way. It's kind of long conversation, really, isn't it?
At what point do we kind of keep kind of hiding and shying away from it?
No, I don't think I don't think those kind of let's call them stigma or all those I hate the word, but like taboo subjects.
Yeah.
I think there's more of a conditioning as in terms of a culture as a community where we are not used to having long conversations or talking therapies.
Yeah.
We are not. I really feel that sometimes when you try and have a deeper conversation about, let's say, sexuality or sex education or even substance misuse or anything, those kind of things, like if you try and raise it and you speak to someone, they're not really conditioned in that way. I think eventually, especially next generation, you'll start seeing a lot more openness in terms of being more engaged in the more conversations that you do have.
The thing is that you think that would be the case, right? But there's still kind of like...
yeah, I'm not just... I will agree with you.
Even amongst our generation, there is that social conditioning, because if your parents have taught you to behave in a certain way and think in a certain attitude, and like, for example, let's just talk about, I don't know, like all these girls that are on TikTok, for example. You know, you got all these girls on TikTok who, you know, just using the platform for whatever. If they're dressed in a certain way, you have certain people who still believe that, you know, women shouldn't be dressed in a certain way. Women shouldn't behave a certain way. That social conditioning is something that it's instilled from generations and generations and generations and generations. And it's like, until we kind of bring it to the forefront and make people realize, look, there is more. Things have changed. How do we adapt? If we adapt, how do we kind of adapt in a way that we're still kind of holding on to our culture? And it's just, and people don't want to have those conversations. And there's a part of our generation where there's a huge change, and there's a part that are quite happy to kind of believe those attitudes are right. But again, if that's your belief and attitude, fair enough, you run with that, you know what I mean? But don't stop people from speaking up about it. And
there's cultural politics, society politics, and there's identity politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is that there's almost a clash between how to bring the identity politics and the cultural one up at the same time.
Yeah.
And I just think there's just a natural give, but eventually they're going in the right direction. Do you feel it's going in the right direction? Yes
and no.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, you know, the podcast was doing great. It was pulling in good numbers, you know, especially it was 10 o'clock at night. The minute we start getting complaints, and, you know, threats that, you know, we're going to send you complaint to Ofcom and stuff like that, then you start thinking, hold on, man, like, what's happening here? Are we doing something wrong by having these real conversations, by real stories? You know, Palmji, for example, she's an amazing model. She's done amazing for Samsung. She's now also in one of the faces of Wagamama. She spoke about being a victim of revenge porn. You know, how her pictures got leaked. This is something that's impacting kids. If you can't have these conversations that are impacting kids in this generation with smartphones and WhatsApp and Snapchat, etc., what is the point in us even talking? Because this can impact your kids. How are you as a parent going to know how to deal with something like that if, and God forbid, it happens to your kid, if it happens? And by her talking about her experiences and talking about, you know, the support she had on one side and then kind of the bullying she had on the other side, if she didn't tell her story, you know, it's a case of these things don't happen. But so many people messaged saying, thank you. You know, you've helped us. We know we're not alone. We know we can reach out to you. You know, going back to Jasmine, for example, by Jasmine saying, look, Core Movement is here to help you guys. People started reaching out to Core Movement and telling them, look, we need help. This is happening, etc. That is the right thing we're achieving from these kind of conversations. But then it's a case of, well, why is our own community stopping us from having these conversations when we can help people? There's so many people out there suffering, whether it's kind of domestic abuse, domestic violence, whether it's emotional abuse, emotional violence, drugs, substance, gangs, you know. And the podcast was there to basically say, look, these are real stories by real people. Reach out to them. You know, another example is Missy D. She was one of the biggest radio presenters, and she basically kind of just said her career got killed off because she was bullied in the industry. But even to this day, Missy's still she's saying that she's getting, you know, people hitting her up, saying, no, we'd love to reach you out for advice, help, etc. Cool. What have we done wrong by allowing people to get help and support by using a platform? You know, BritAsia is about British Asian conversations. Should we just kind of stop having these conversations and talk about how everything's great? And I always said this, I was like, if I do this podcast, I don't want to have guests coming on and we just talk to guests about, oh, hey, how's your year been? What's the next release? What's the future plans? Because it's been there, it's done it. You know what I mean? Show the other side. Show that there is toxic sides. There is mental health issues in the industry. If you are a model, you know, you can potentially not every director is there to help you build a career. Some directors have their own agendas. You know, there was an episode about OnlyFans, and we wanted to understand, like, why is there such a rise of, South Asian girls jumping on OnlyFans? And the best way to do it is ask somebody who's on it. So, so many girls were happy to come on, but then they got a bit scared, which is totally understandable. One girl came on and she kind of told, look, why she got to OnlyFans, her journey, etc. Now, what Apache was saying was like, we asked the question, me and Apache were like, how do your parents feel about it? Are your parents okay with it? How did you deal with, the issues that you faced, etc., etc. So all the questions that people want to know, we asked those questions. And before this episode could even air, it got pulled off online. We hadn't even put it on YouTube. We put it on Instagram and TikTok. And, it got reported so many times, it got pulled off. But the thing that makes me laugh was the numbers were huge. There was nothing sexually explicit in that conversation that was happening with her.
The number of complaints was huge?
Yeah. For the fact that TikTok had put it down multiple times, Instagram had put it down multiple times. Now, if we put it on TV, we would have had a lot more complaints. But what the conversations that were happening were kind of not just about her and OnlyFans, etc. It was talking about, why are parents not having conversations with their kids about sex, for example? Safe sex. We're so kind of scared to talk to our kids about, safe sex, rape, etc., 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 which is just causing that snowball effect of, they're having to go out there, figure it out themselves. And when they figure it out themselves and they make a mess of it, we're still not there to help them. If we kind of nip this in the bud early on and talk about it, it's a healthier relationship. But again, up in there didn't like that. They're like, don't have these conversations. But then we had to kind of change the podcast up. Then we were like, you know what? Let's kind of take a step back and let's start rebuilding again. So obviously, other podcasts came and went. But again, people were just saying, look, there was like, I'd probably say that 80% love, 20% hate. But that 20% hate is the ones who go over and beyond of emailing, complaining, etc., etc. But the 80% were literally like, when is it coming back? Bring it back, bring season 2 back, etc. So we had to change it up a little bit. We then kind of went on to TikTok and we kind of made like the bite-sized conversations cut up. Yeah. And even then, the conversations we were having, they were real conversations with real people about things that are impacting the industry, the kind of entertainment side of things. Again, and again, you read through the comments. You have, people who are generally kind of happy these conversations are happening. And yeah, then there's those people who are just absolutely against it. You're never going to find that medium. And I've always said, look, as long as I've got the platform, I will keep having these conversations. I will keep bringing these things to the forefront. If it keeps getting pulled down, you will find other channels. Tony Shager was giving his backing and support of it, and he likes that these conversations are happening. And if we're not going to have these conversations, who will? Because you're not going to have them at home. You're not going to have them on these other platforms. There's so many platforms out there who kind of shy away from it. But one thing which was kind of positive was when these conversations started happening, I started seeing other media outlets having the same conversation. So again, it has that positive effect of like, it takes one person to start it, when others start talking about it as well. But if we don't use these platforms to do, the best of our ability, what is the point of having them?
Do you feel in terms of like, I think it's been a bit of an eye-opener in some ways, because you're trying to get a captive audience, you're trying to get an audience for people to listen. Yeah. And there is a risk of when you kind of sensationalize it, you bite-size down it and you put it onto Instagram, you're going to put up the most catchiest point. And some people, I'm guessing the majority of people who complain didn't even watch the whole thing. Yeah. They've saw that one little bit, made the assumption of what it was like, and that's it. They've just reacted to it. Do you reckon it's the case of trying to work around and actually making the people out there understand that this is a different forum, a different space?
Like you can only educate someone so far, and I think also age makes a massive difference. Like obviously, when I was younger, you become hot-headed. You react things like in an instant. You don't realize that there's another side to a story. There's there might be 4 sides to a story. You just what's in front of you. You see red, and you go and attack. There's so many times there's clips on, you see on these meme pages, etc., where somebody posts a clip of something very, very controversial. Everybody reacts to it, but they've cut out even the start or the ending. So you don't actually know what's happening at the start or the end. You just kind of see things. And realistically, this kind of concept is clickbait, right? You create clickbait to bring the traffic to engage people. And, some people will understand that it's clickbait and will watch the rest. Some people they'll be so hang up on that one kind of segment and just kind of keep going. But it is what it is, man. Like, change takes time. You know,
Yeah.
If this podcast was going to be scrapped, it would have been scrapped a long time ago. But we're looking at season 2 now. So we're planning season 2. And
so did you have to pull season 1 a lot shorter than what you were scheduled to do it?
Yeah. So season 1, I believe 6 episodes went out, and then last 3 or 4, 3 couldn't go out because obviously of the controversy of complaints, so we stuck them online. And the last one, we just couldn't risk it going out because the heat it was getting on, TikTok and Insta are getting pulled down, etc. There was, however, one podcast, and those who were involved in it know who they are. This podcast, if it went out, would have kind of shaken the industry because I didn't realize that there's such wrongdoing everywhere of how people are treated in certain organizations, how there's corruption in certain organizations and so on and so forth. This was a very, 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 very good podcast for those that actually watched it internally. But the problem was you put this out there. Yes, it will create a storm. Yes, it will create possible change. But the biggest problem was we were scared that if we put this podcast out, it would damage more people's careers. Because the people that need protecting won't be protected because the guy at the top will see this and be like, you know what, you guys shouldn't have said this. Why did you say this? This isn't true. Da, 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 da. And this podcast, I've still got it. And I hope one day it does come out because it was actually like for me, there was a girl on there, Rupinda, who was part of the original kind of podcast team. And even for some of the stuff that she heard from it and I heard from it was a case of, really? What? Since when? Like, how long has this been going on for? Like, we were shocked because obviously the people on there have been in the industry a lot longer. And it wasn't nice, man, that this, and I said this to everyone, like even like youngsters kind of reach out to the channel, etc. Like if I'm about, don't think this industry is all glammy and glitzy and great. You're gonna have to grind. Like, you talk about people who want the money, etc. There's some people who've been grinding for years and years and years, and they still haven't had a big break. And then there's some that, have paid their way to kind of get to where they are. There's some people that have screwed over people to get to where they are. There's, I know so many kind of producers out there who've stolen beats from other producers, claimed it as their own, haven't given credit. I know so many models who've kind of spread lies about other models. I know there's dancers who've done like this internal dancing project. You hear about this kind of stuff. And it's a case of, it's not right.
This is all setting you up to release your own book one day.
One day.
I could just tell.
Yeah, but this is the thing. It's like even if you kind of release these stories out there, who's going to believe you? There's been instances where people have kind of called out things that were wrong, and they were 100% wrong, but it gets flushed down. You know what I mean? It gets flushed down. The person's camp will get their kind of entourage or their followers to kind of kill it. And yes, I understand that, it's somebody's career at the end of the day, etc. Nobody wants to be called out for doing wrong. But if wrong is wrong in this industry, man, it needs to be called out, because if you're impacting and causing danger to someone's life, it's not right, man. And this is what this podcast is about, and it'll always be about, is calling out the wrong.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to think of the differences in terms of what different kind of podcasts are out there. You guys are kind of focusing on subject matter rather than actual subjects in it, in terms of like an individual. And you naturally, through art of conversation, you're gonna bring up some positive and a lot of negative. But surely in some of the, like, when you're kind of listening to this bit, I get the sense of kind of like restriction, self-restriction, self-censorship, all of these things that you can't really be as free as you want to be. Has there ever been a point where you're thinking about actually just I'm not taking a little dig here, but like how you've left all the other stuff that this might actually fit into that pile again?
No, because, and the reason for this is it's working. If it wasn't getting a reaction, the thing is, like, if you take into music, for example, like if I kind of go back, like I didn't leave Bhangra. I kind of like I'm still involved, but not as actively involved in shows.
Yeah.
But in terms of, for example, the music side of things, I was in the wrong camp. Had I been under any other camp, who would have kind of taken care of me, I would have still pursued music. I would have still gone down that route. I would have stayed that kind of side. If you're not around the right team or the right people who are helping you progress and push you and challenge you, then you're not in the right team. So all these kind of things, like, you know, the music side, etc., I wasn't in the right team. I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't being pushed. I was being constrained. I was being told, don't do this because I don't want you to do it. Not because it's not the right thing to do, it's because I don't want you to do it, you can't do it. If I can't have it, you can't have it. You know, there's one good friend of mine, and he was approached by a very, very big record label. And he was told, no, you can't work for them. If it doesn't benefit me, why should I let you work for them? You know, somebody who's kind of built their craft for years, made so many beats, you know, done so many events to kind of get to this kind of the pinnacle of their career, was told, no, you can't go there. You know, there was another artist who was kind of coming into the industry, and he would have been huge now. But the way he was kind of killed off because Next Man wasn't allowed to get involved in the people who want to collaborate with him, it was horrible, man. And this guy's career could have been up there because he came at the right time.
I'm not justifying it from that side, but like music, the stories that you're saying is kind of like very similar in all aspects of music. Do you think it's just only exclusive to Punjabi music that you're talking about?
No, as in this happens everywhere, but I feel like in the Punjabi side of things, it's because, for example, you look at mainstream. Mainstream has a huge infrastructure. You know what I mean? There's more structure, there's more kind of roots, etc. In the Punjabi industry, there isn't a huge structure. There isn't X amount of roads. You literally have, like, you can look at it like a motorway, like 3 lanes. So when your lanes are being blocked off, there's nowhere else for you to go. So where does one go when they can't go anywhere? You're being told, that's it. This is the end of the road for you. You can keep driving up to this point and drive back, drive forth, drive back. Eventually, you're going to get bored. You're going to be like, well, what is this? Then you look on the other side, you know, and it's like, well, hold on. They're traveling further. Why are they traveling further? Why can't I go on that road? It's like, well, hold on. Because, and it's the Asian attitude of, if I can't have it, you can't have it. If I can't do well, you're not going to do well. I'd rather pull you down to make me feel better than, you know, let you go on, build yourself, and then, you know, maybe you might help me down life. And I give an example, like with Apache Indian. Like the first time I met Apache, I didn't ask him to post about me on his Instagram. You know, Apache's a mainstream artist at the end of the day, right? He's got a massive mainstream following. You look at his streams even now, his streams are in the millions. And he posted about me, kind of, you know, an encouraging, heartwarming message. And that is somebody who would lift you up. Whereas would any other artist do that? Would somebody kind of go out of their way to be like, yo, I see something in this guy. He's going to do well. Let me kind of help him as much as I can. You know, Apache's never, ever asked for money to be on the podcast. For him, it's about helping and growing. His attitude and ethos has always been, if we all grow, we all do well. And you know what?
But do you feel that's because, like, obviously the route that he's taken, he was quite different to everybody else in terms of his journey, that he experiences those kind of divisions very early on, and some of those obstacles of you know, bringing 2-3 cultures together, fusing it, making a sound, doing it. He was fighting some of them battles very early on,
you
know, and then won. You know, that was successful, gone through there, and he can see those issues, those social issues that we were just talking about earlier in terms of your subject matter, to try and actually try and address those as early as possible, especially for young, encouraging artists like yourself in whatever you want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know, but the other side of it is also, he's been there, he's done it. He doesn't want anybody else to go for the same battles. So if he can help someone avoid that, he's going to help someone avoid that.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to my earlier kind of thing of, you know, there's been people that have come into you know, my life, my friends' lives, etc., of people who know right from wrong, but they'll deliberately tell you wrong because they went through the wrong themselves. Is it because they want you to learn whatever, or is it a case of they don't want you to be better than them? And that's just kind of, I think, we have a long way to go, man. Like, you can be best friends with somebody in the industry in any form one day. Tomorrow, eventually, when it comes to money, when it comes to fame, when it comes to something as petty as even Instagram followers, you're going to see division. You know, I've seen it in a lot of kind of young kids that have kind of come through the channel. You know, BritAsia have a thing called BritAsia Academy.
Yeah.
And you got to teach these kids, you know, who are coming in, like, listen, it's not a one-man show in terms of any project that you do. Any project that you do, you know, you got to credit the researcher. You got to credit the guy shooting the camera. You got to credit the sound guy. You got to credit the editor. You got to credit the presenter. There's so many layers to a successful thing. But if you go out there and you post it like, I did this is all me. No, man, that's not right. And I think, again, it's a case of being taught the right thing. Like, I've been through the bad times. You know, I if anybody from the academy comes up to me and asks me for advice, I'll tell them the truth. I'll tell them, like, try and do this, try and do that. Because if somebody does well based on your advice, it should make you feel good. You know what? That person's gone to really, really well, and I was a part of that. Don't be bitter and sour about that. Oh, it should have been me, etc., etc. When your time's gonna come, your time's gonna come.
But do you think then, like, you're almost propagating the whole thing that you're going against, because you've got an academy, you're selecting people who've got high followers, or it might not be high followers, but the potential to be and becoming influencers. They're seeing people with high numbers, whether they've bought fake views or whatever, that they say to get there, this is the image, and they will just do anything to get to that level, whether it's in there, and you reward them by saying, if you get high numbers, we're going to play you on here, or we'll give you a contract to become the face of BritAsia or part of the podcast or whatever that may be.
BritAsia don't do that, you know. We don't pick based on numbers. So,
no, I know. I totally just said it, but maybe I'm kind of generalizing it in terms of kind of media.
I know, as in media industry as a whole, it's a case of, if somebody's got good numbers and good following, etc., that's an investment. Don't look at the person who's got less numbers, who could be equally as great. You know, and the other day, and I've kind of given you a story about this, is you know, BritAsia were compiling their top 100 tracks of 2021. And, you know, you were going through every song that kind of released. And there's obviously your standard artists that have, you know, the millions and millions of views. There's some artists that kind of out of nowhere just hit a billion views, whatever, right? And then you have some artists who are touring week in, week out, who don't have higher numbers. And you can tell, like, and I'll give you like G Sidhu. G Sidhu's numbers, I can 100% say hand on heart, they're genuine numbers. I don't think he's fabricated any of his numbers. And you can tell he's successful because, you know, he's getting booked week in, week out. He's getting interviews. He's working with big guys, etc., etc. That is success. You know what I mean? And if somebody looked at G Sidhu who didn't know anything about Punjabi music, they might be like, oh, well, hold on. He hasn't got a high number of followers or a high number of views compared to next man who's bought everything, etc. Let's reward the guys who've got a bigger number of followers who's following, etc., because that's more beneficial to us. But in reality, G Sidhu's got, you know, lower views than next man from the bend. You know, you're rewarding the wrong person for the wrong things, but not rewarding the right guy for doing the right things. And I think that's across the industry. It's a case of this perception of, you know, hits equal success, views equal success. You know, KS Bumrah uncle came and I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me straight, he was like, you look at every wedding playlist, right? He goes, you have X amount of artists who release X amount of music per year. And why is it that the wedding kind of playlists haven't changed in the last 10, 15 years? You got 1, 2, 5 maybe new songs that you kind of put in, because your kind of start segment, standard. Miss Pooja, Gera Gera, Diljit's song, that's still playing every wedding season all around the world. It goes, the end of the parties, because you're still hearing our songs like Apna Sangeet, Heat Up, Remi, etc. The middle are kind of, you know, you're sharing miles, etc. But he's saying, if these artists were so successful with their numbers, etc., shouldn't their songs be played at weddings?
You know something, I would agree, but then I would say significantly I saw a change in that in the last sort of 2 years, that I would say, in my experience. Like, I'm away from it all now, but it was, I definitely saw the English sets in weddings started to get bigger and bigger, less Punjabi music time. And then I also started seeing like other songs that like those boys that AP in them, like AP, they're unbelievable what they're achieving. And they, you know, they're practically mainstream, like what they've done. And you can just see their tour stuff. These guys they know what they're doing. You know, they are masters of their craft and executing their plans. But like when I saw like Insane being played at a wedding, I was like, I don't understand that vibe, because I'm not that demographic anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not that demographic anymore. So those are those kind of staple diet tracks that were always like lifetime. You could bank your house out, people are going to start dancing to.
Yeah.
Eventually, they'll just start fading out. The same ways in the 80s and the 90s, you had staple songs that you knew that were going to be there. But the next genre, I think we're such uncharted waters. And it's really true in one aspect is when your song that comes out that you like, you dance to it.
Yeah.
You know, because I think we're in that much a fruitful position that now there is so much variety of the kind of music that you like. Like I like Punjabi folk, old school Punjabi folk. I like hip hop, like Punjabi. I love that. That's my kind of thing. I'm not saying I wouldn't listen to anything else, but it's like if I had to pick my stuff, you already know your kind of your taste that you want to do. And so like I will say like that whole market and numbers and things like that will start influencing it, because now people will be like taking pictures on Snapchat of their wedding or where their mates are out there, and then tag the artist, and if we tag the artist, we're going to get more views on our things. It's all driven by social media from that side, rather than the actual event and enjoyment.
100%. You know what? Look at, and like one thing is, you go to a club, you'll see a group of people sitting there, you know, faces sour as anything, right? Pull out the phone for the gram, suddenly drinks in the air, smiling, etc., etc. That goes on the story. Then back to, you know me, being antisocial.
I got one mate, yeah. I won't say, he'll know who it is, and he'll probably follow me after. This guy goes to any session, he goes to a session and he's there literally 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He'll be at the beginning of where, like, let's say there's bottles of that. He'll take the picture. And they go, yeah, big session, whatever going on, yeah. He'll probably have one glassy. About half an hour later, you're like, where the fuck's he gone?
Yeah.
And then on his Insta, then he'll do that. He'll go to like a few of the parties and do the same. It's classic. Until we took the piss out of him once, and then he was like, nah, he started to stay. But it's people who have mastered the art of like social media and popularity and who to connect with.
And I say this to all my clients as well, like, don't believe the hype of social media. You know, I've had clients where, you know, we've grown their page organically and they've hit big numbers. I've had some clients where I told them straight, like, you're not going to grow because your brand is just two-dimensional. You need to change it, etc., etc. Next thing I know, you know, they've got like 30,000 followers overnight. But it's a case of, you know, they bought the fake followers. They're happy to live a fake image online, but they're wanting acceptance of this virtual people. You know what I mean? It's this very kind of social media is like, as a business, yeah, great, fair enough. But as a mindset, it is dangerous and it is toxic.
But I think the model's weird. Like, I have a separate podcast channel for this one, and you'll get just random people just following you because they're trying to sell you a lot of crap, or they do that. So you're naturally going to get those. You'll get podcasters actually buying massive. You know, I don't know how many. Let's say about 4 posts, and all of a sudden you got like 10,000 followers. You're like, okay, this is it's just strange. And I just thought, if it's going into this market and there's no one here, like, you know, but I try to I'm in conversation with a guest, and they're asking me, oh yeah, you know, how many followers have you got, and how many people subscribe? And I'm like, mate, I don't give it. Like, my wife don't follow me. I don't give a shit. You know, it's just like, I'm just doing it out of my own enjoyment, having conversations, understanding people with different perspectives, their stories, not my story, their opinion, but we can have a conversation of opinions.
Do you know the funniest thing?
But then you get pushed, because if I want that guest, I need to hit these numbers. I need to hit that numbers to get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the thing, that not everybody will support the kind of, and I call it, not talking about you specifically, but the little guy. Like, when you're starting out, you could have the best kind of confidence and skills and whatever, beats or whatever. You reach out to, you know, next man who's killing it. He'll look at you like, who are you?
Yeah.
And there's a good chance you're not going to be given that opportunity and support.
Mate, like, there's some people who you've helped, you supported, you've gone through you message, you see the messages seen, no response. And you're like, and I always felt this very early on, which was like never meet your heroes in some ways.
Yeah.
You know, because then you still have that picture of innocence, and it reminds you of good times. But sometimes when you just, like, it's just blatantly rude, you know, like courtesy, manners and stuff like that, If you don't want to jump up, fine. Just say that's no problem. I'll respect you and say, yeah, 100%, that's fine. But don't kind of go on and do this, because like I can see you down the pub, mate. If I really want, I'm just doing you a courtesy. It's just my own thing. Like, who knows? I might have 5 episodes left of me. And if I just decide to say I don't want to do it anymore, then that's fine. I've just done what I've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't pay my bills. It doesn't do that kind of thing. But it's out of enjoyment that I want to do it.
Yeah.
But when it starts becoming toxic, like the word that you said, where I could feel it, I could genuinely feel it, where it's going in terms of like social media is going to start driving. You got this many views and that. Yeah, look, man, I'm in 100, 200, 300, 400 views, or 500, 1,000 views. I'm not like hitting numbers of like 1 million, what some of these other people are, and understanding their lane. But honestly, like, I didn't, at the time when I started, I was very adamant, like, it's not the numbers, but like, I will be honest, sometimes like, your eye starts creeping on it and you're like going, this is a bit strange. But you kind of work out, like, if I got X amount of downloads and this was a song, I'd be number one. I'll be number one in that, the worldwide genre chart, in it.
Do you find it pressuring, like, to keep the comment? Like, for example, we've got me today, right? But to find guests to keep the narrative going.
Fuck, man. You know something? It's the first question anyone's kind of asked me. You're the first question to kind of ask me.
The reason I asked that is, like, for example, like, I've been aware of the podcast. You know, you've had harps, you've had dips, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Then do you kind of find that, okay, you've got these ones, how do I get the next one? And if I get the next one, how do I keep it evolving? Because that's one of the things that I wasn't say I struggled with. It was,
man, you know what it is? This is the God's honest truth, which was all my interests that I have. I kind of made like different sections. I said, like, these are the music guys that I would always love to kind of speak to, and some people wouldn't want to speak to. But I just made like a dream list in it. So I had politics that I'm interested in, drugs and alcohol, which this is my kind of specialty. The other stuff, I had this kind of bit in there, and I thought, you know, what I'd do is kind of 1 week, one section from each of them, and do it that way. I then said, like, I wanted to make sure I get the right kind of ratio, so make sure I have women in there involved and stuff like that. But then I realized, like, I don't know many women anyway, you know what I mean? So I was like, there was just all these factors.
Yeah.
And then naturally, because of my interest that I've got, it was swayed more into kind of the music side of stuff, because everyone in that way, everyone who I speak to kind of lean into that side of it. Yeah. So I was getting to a point where, like, I was recording like once I record 3 a day. I recorded in one day. I recorded 3, so I know that's 3 weeks of content.
Yeah.
I and when I did that, I was, you know, with harps was first, and then I like DJ dips, and there was one more that I recorded at that time, and I was really happy, because then I didn't need to stress about it. Yeah. I tried to do that again to book, and like, it's the night before where they'll cancel, or it'll be, I'm not feeling well, or I'm not doing this, that, and the other. And I was like, you know, that's fine, but you won't hear from them again when you try and lift it back up. Or someone says, yeah, man, 100%, I'm on it. You give a date, nothing, you don't hear. And what that ends up being is like, I know that every Wednesday I got to drop it.
Yeah.
And I'm editing Tuesday night through the night. And I've probably just interviewed them on that Tuesday evening, or I'm like running, like risking, like not having anyone. But I kind of keep to that kind of schedule that I want to do, because that's just the natural kind of work ethic. But it's really hard to try and get people in and to do it. It really is, and if I was honest, my naivety, I thought, I didn't think it was going to be as hard as that. It's just, you know what I mean? But it is hard, man.
I was expecting someone to come down. It's supposed to be at 10 o'clock. It's what, 2 o'clock now. And last night, this person was like, yeah, I'll be there, etc. Adamant 10 o'clock start. It's what, nearly 2 o'clock. I haven't heard anything from. Do you know what I mean? And I find that that's probably the most annoying kind of thing from it. It's like,
I had that with Tony when I went to go and meet him at 11 o'clock, and he turned up at, what was it? Well, I hope he's listening, about 10 past 1. And he gave me 5. He was telling me something. And he was like, I was there for 5 minutes, and I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
His timekeeping is atrocious.
I mean, up in general, man, it's just time people do that.
I don't, man, because if you're 11 o'clock, you're late. If we agree 11 o'clock, I'm like 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
Because if you're on time, you're late.
Yeah.
And if you're late, you're out of time.
That's it.
I'm like Roy Keane like that on timing. Time is always a big thing.
When he said to me, "Us just getting everything set up," I totally forgot. I was supposed to be doing this with you. And he texted me again saying, "Ready when you are." So when I said 10 minutes.
Did you? Yeah, because we had the conversation. We literally have it. So just for everyone, like we've never spoken before this. About 5 minutes on that day, which Tony said, and then I've messaged you. I said, "All right, I'll see you in 10 minutes." None of this is scripted. None of this is pre-planned. And it was just like, "All right, see you in 10 minutes." And then you've forgotten in that 10 minutes, yeah?
10 minutes, I forgot. Yeah, I was about to go out. I was texting, okay, I'll come back.
Like 10 minutes. And I've gone, come on, let's just do it.
Exactly. No. Awesome, bro.
So in terms of kind of like balancing out when you've got a guest or you're dealing with like some of the social media kind of bit, how do you then manage some of their expectations and their egos?
Egos is probably the hardest thing to manage, man. Like some companies and clients and whatever, like will believe that their product is the best thing. They'll believe, and it's good to have self-belief, but there's great having self-belief. And I even said it to one, I was like, the people around you are yes men. You don't want yes men around you, because if somebody will always agree to you, your opinions and your thoughts, and doesn't challenge you ever, that's not the right person to have. Because they're literally there because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they just don't know. And 9 times out of 10, they don't know any better, so they're just going to agree with you. So it's one of those things where I would always say, if this is what you believe, tell me why you think it's working, because it wasn't working prior to when I started. Now I'm here and it's changed and it's working. Do you want to kind of go back?
So do you manage the BritAsia social media channels?
No. As in, I oversee it.
Okay.
Because obviously they've got a team now.
Yeah.
Who has on a day-to-day basis, they kind of run it, etc. But in terms of strategizing, etc., then yeah, that kind of goes from me and Tony.
Because I have seen that. I have seen the Instagram, especially channel for you, like to kind of explode. Really.
Yeah.
I think that's gotten bigger.
Yeah, and that was one of the things. So obviously, when I was kind of cooled down, it was a case of understanding, why was the page quite small like last year? But the reality was the previous owners hadn't digitally evolved. They weren't on Instagram, they weren't on TikTok, they weren't utilizing, all these kind of, as social media evolves, you need to be on it. Whether you're active or not, it's entirely up to you. So when obviously we came in, it was a case of, previous ownerships didn't kind of run it or own it. Now we've kind of got it. Now we haven't played catch up. And then for me, it was an easy task. It was, what's happened? What is the best bits of everything else? Bring the best bits of everything else into one page. Nobody would have a reason to go look elsewhere.
Yeah, because I retweeted you like when Ronaldo scored yesterday.
Yeah,
against Arsenal. That was a good one. I just thought BritAsia talking about Man United and Ronaldo was fucking. Yeah. Who would have thought it?
This is the thing. So the kind of people we've got in now, again, like you got to have the right people with the right mindset. It's no good bringing somebody in who has no interest about the industry or knowledge about the industry, because it's harder to teach someone about things. For example, like you talk about music, right? Now, talk about the golden days of UK Bhangra. After the bands was the kind of 2000s to 2010. There's no point bringing somebody who has no idea about that kind of period to kind of talk to other people about. And a good key example was K.S. Mucken. Haridika, he came down, but Haridika obviously was really young when K.S. Mucken, before he became a Singh. Then he became a Singh, and now obviously he's gone back to being a Monna. So when he came in, I was like, that's K.S. Mucken. She's like, no, that's not. I was like, yes, it is. This is how he used to look before. She says, nah, he has a bug, he has a beard. I was like, that's the same guy. But again, for like those guys, like that generation don't know about that music prior. They don't know about Hooper too.
So, but how do you then educate? Like, it's not her fault. I'm just saying, like
her fault, because obviously she wasn't born, essentially, right?
But how then, because as a music channel, and like obviously you're talking about music subject, how then do you kind of ensure that history is there? That is it just because you're giving lessons on an artist, or is it as simple as that? Or
it's a two-way thing, man. Like, number one is somebody has kind of base knowledge. It's about building that base knowledge. If they have no knowledge, it's making them do the research. because there's no point like somebody spoon feeding you, telling you what's right. You need to figure out what's right. You know, there's been previous kind of people who were running the page who had no knowledge and no information, and they're just posting things which was irrelevant. But realistically, you got to realize the social media kind of demographic is a certain demographic of people. It's kids, men. You know, it's your 16 to your 25-year-olds is your kind of core, and then from there you have like your other demographics, etc. And my aim, and I always said to him, I was like, the reach needs to be around 1 million people a month. If we're not reaching 1 million people a month, then there's something seriously wrong. And within the first 4 months, we achieved that. And it was about strategizing what's right. You know, there's so much stock content this channel has of previous events. We had to bring it back. People want to see these legends. People want to see like Lemba live. People want to see, you know, all these kind of exclusive. That's one side. Then on the other side, it's be the kind of TMZ of Asian.
Yeah.
You know, when something happens, cover it first.
But is there a risk then in terms of like some of the purists that you're going into gossip?
As in, yes and no. As in, like, you don't want to be like a gossip where like you're making up allegations and lies, etc. Make it factual. You know, if someone.
But it's a thin line, though, isn't it? It is a thin line of like you could see. You could maybe say that sometimes you could dance on that line.
Yeah.
And quite easily is to kind of create that gossip or create a situation.
Of course, but then it's as a media channel, you know, if you look at MTV, for example, they have, you know, elements of telling about what's happening amongst artists, etc., etc. You know, why can't we be the same? Should we kind of just be, like, here's a song, here's a new release, etc. You know, tell people what's happening about their favorite artists. If an artist has done something great, applaud it. Like, you know, Sukhinda Shinda went to Disneyland.
Yeah, well, I saw it with Donkey in it. With Donkey, I saw that's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's just one of those kind of things of like, it's a different side to Shinda. You will see them as like, you know, the great musician, the great singer, etc. Here he is having fun, I'm assuming, with his family. But even then, he's singing I Didn't Kushi and That to a Donkey from Shrek. And it's like, it shows that there's less. If you can bring your kind of favorite artist all to one place, it's a great thing because you essentially become the kind of main hotspot for a media outlet. You know, companies in India, they have it on point. There's various pages out there who literally do the same thing. But we have nothing in the UK that does that. And so the BritAsia page, for my kind of vision for it was, you know, and again, I aligned with Tony, was let's bring everything into one place, you know what I mean? Don't just limit ourselves to kind of, you know, Punjabi songs, Punjabi music. Talk about, you know, more about the film industry. Talk about, you know, TikTok's a great hotspot to find content of what artists are up to. Because some artists will post on TikTok, but they won't post on Instagram. So, yeah, that's my kind of role there.
And where do you see in terms of like combining both of your role? Well, you almost do 3 roles, ain't you? Really, you got your own kind of social media for BritAsia, and then like the podcasting for BritAsia.
Yeah.
What do you reckon the formula is now for if you're giving advice for like young people?
Sorry, in what sense? Sorry?
In terms of kind of like the platforms to utilize or subject matter or kind of behavior.
First thing I'd say for social media, man, is don't ever let it take over your life. You know, there's people that sit there that stress over likes, comments, etc., views and whatnot, whatever. If somebody likes you, they like you. If they hate you, you hate you. If you're coming into any industry, whether it's music, professionalism, commercialism, etc., you're going to get hate regardless. You have to learn to balance the good and the bad together. You know what I mean? That's number one, I'd say to them. Number two, I'd say to them, look, whatever you're doing, keep at it. You know, there was years when I wasn't even being paid learning how to social media manage when I was younger. And looking back at it, you know, you realize you've been, you know, manipulated through free CDs and stuff like that. But if I didn't put in that work and those lessons then, it wouldn't put me in the position that I am now. You know, that's one side for social media. On the podcast side of things, the way we're looking to kind of go ahead with it is we want to evolve it. You know, we've always said, look, there's nothing stopping us making the weekly podcast into more a kind of breakfast show. You know, why can't we make it a breakfast show like once a week to start with? You know, talk about what's happening in the world, talk about new music, keep it current, and kind of build that team back together. You know, we have done a few pilots. You know, we might be doing a Christmas special, we might be doing a New Year's Eve special, etc. The team will grow. And I want it to grow in the sense of you know, it's a team. So I don't have to be there. You know, if you have a residency of 4 guys there, for example, 4 guys and girls, those 4 guys and girls can basically vibe even if one's missing. So that's kind of my kind of projections. And I hope, you know, that help them work in 2022.
This is the bandwagon, and I give this opportunity to everyone. I know that you've kind of said quite a lot of things off your chest, really, in a very short amount of time. So, is there a bandwagon that you want to kind of jump on or jump off?
Supporting United, bro. It's hurting too much. No. Honestly, not really, man. Like,
I'm hoping you're gonna say jump on.
No. I'm a United through and through, man. Yeah. If you can't support them when they're losing, don't support them.
Yeah, it's true.
But no, I'm quite happy where I'm at. Like, I've been luckily fortunate enough to kind of work with good people. I've been fortunate to work with bad people, but the bad sometimes teaches you the good. But other than that, man, like, I'm happy where I am. I'm looking forward to 2022. It was great to kind of meet with you last week when you came down to do this. I don't really kind of do these kind of things because I always say, look, the brand's more important, etc. But if I've said something that's inspired someone or has helped someone, then I've done the right thing.
Yeah, I definitely would say, like, I was really encouraged when I saw BritAsia doing the podcast, and I ain't gonna catch every episode or in the future or however it is, but I think it's really important that we create those conversation spaces. If somebody's done wrong, then at least there's a channel for them to kind of have that road to redemption. If someone's doing good, it's an opportunity to celebrate and just lift everyone up in the same bit. And I think we need to have a little bit more of that. I think, but looking at some of the stories, a lot of experience, a lot of the wisdom comes through struggle, rightly or wrongly. And some of those people who felt that have been wronged or you've wronged by, they've probably learned their own lessons, but they're doing it in their own way. But I really appreciate that.
No, awesome.
All right, bro. I'll catch up with you. I'll see you on yours soon, mate.
No, 100%, man. Let me know when you're ready. We'll have you on.
All right, mate. Cheers.
I'll take it. Cheers.